Claude just rewrote the entire Bun runtime from Zig-to-Rust, 750,000 lines of code. 11 days, 99.8% of the existing test suite passing. And the feature that made it possible is now available to everyone. Here's what happened. Yesterday, Anthropic released Claude Opus 4.8, their newest flagship model. Same price as the last one. Stronger at coding, but the real story isn't the model itself. It's a new feature shipping alongside it called Dynamic Workflows. Dynamic Workflows lets Claude Code spin up hundreds of parallel subagents, autonomous workers that fan out across your code base, tackle pieces of a massive task simultaneously, verify each other's work, and converge on a single result. One prompt, one plan, one coordinated swarm. Work you'd normally plan in quarters now finishes in days. If you're an indie developer building a game with AI coding tools, listen carefully. The bottleneck hasn't been model intelligence for months. Models are smart enough. The bottleneck has been scope. You can ask Claude to refactor a single file and it nails it every time. But ask it to migrate your entire project from Unity's built-in render pipeline to the universal render pipeline across 200 shaders and 50 materials, and you're in for a long weekend of babying it, file by file. You'd break the task into pieces, manage context windows, restart sessions when the agent loses the thread, and manually verify each file. That's not autonomous coding. That's babysitting. Dynamic Workflows removes that ceiling entirely. You describe the outcome and Claude handles the rest. So what's actually new in Opus 4.8? 3 things worth your time. First, it's the strongest coding model yet. The software engineering benchmark, SWE-bench Pro, jumped from 64.3% to 69.2%. That's a big step in a benchmark where gains are usually measured in tenths of a point. It beats GPT 5.5 on GDPval, the real-world agent task benchmark, by over 100 points. And here's the part one care about most. Anthropic says Opus 4.8 is 4 times less likely to let bugs slip through its own code compared to Opus 4.7. That's not a benchmark trick. That's a behavioral change. The model actually stops and flags when it's unsure of its own work instead of confidently shipping broken code. For anyone who's burned hours debugging a model's confident wrong answer, that's the headline feature. The CEO of Devon said it improves on Opus 4.6 and fixes the verbosity and tool calling issues from Opus 4.7. That's a real quote from a real customer who runs thousands of autonomous coding sessions a day. Second, there's a new effort control. You can now choose how hard Claude thinks before it responds. There's a new slider in Claude.ai right next to the model selector. The default is high, which is the sweet spot for most tasks. But if you're making an architecture decision, running a long autonomous session, or tackling something where the cost of being wrong is high, you can crank it up to extra or max. The model spends more tokens, takes more thinking steps, and gives you better results. On the flip side, if you just need a quick answer or you're trying to conserve your rate limits, you can dial it down to medium or low and get a faster, cheaper response. This is something that should have existed a year ago. Different tasks deserve different levels of effort, and now you have the dial. Third, fast mode is 3 times cheaper. Same model runs at roughly 2.5 times the speed. It costs $10 per million input tokens and 50 per million output tokens. For comparison, the standard mode is 5 and 25. So fast mode costs twice as much per token, but it's 3 times cheaper than fast mode was on the previous generation. That's the price of admission for the kind of high throughput agent work that Dynamic Workflows enables. When you're running hundreds of subagents in parallel, speed matters more than peak intelligence on each individual call. Now let's talk about the real-world impact, because benchmarks are fine, but you need to know what this actually does for your daily workflow. Jad Sumner, the creator of Bun, used Dynamic Workflows to port the entire Bun runtime from Zig to Rust. 750,000 lines of Rust. Let me break down how it worked. Because the architecture is important. The first workflow mapped the correct Rust lifetime for every struct field in the Zig codebase. Every single one. That's a task that would take a human engineer weeks of careful analysis. The second workflow wrote every .rs file as a behavior identical port of its Zig counterpart. Hundreds of agents working in parallel, with 2 reviewer agents checking each file. A fixed loop then ran the build and the test suite repeatedly until both passed clean. After the port landed, an overnight workflow found and fixed unnecessary data copies, opening a pull request for each one for final human review. 11 days from first commit to merge, 99.8% test pass rate. Now, was this partly a launch stunt? Yes. The creator of Astro confirmed as much on Bluesky, and honestly, the timing makes it obvious. But here's the thing about stunts. They only work if the technology is real, and this technology is very real. Bun is a production runtime used by tens of thousands of developers. You can't fake a port of 750,000 lines that passes the real test suite. Here's what this means for you. In concrete terms, you know that refactor you've been putting off for 3 months because it touches 100 files and you can't afford to break things. That migration from your old networking layer to the new one. That performance audit across every script in your game looking for allocation issues in hot paths. You can now hand all of those to Claude and say, create a workflow. Claude writes an orchestration plan on the fly. It breaks the task into subtasks. It spins up a fleet of agents to tackle them in parallel. Some agents do the work. Other agents try to break what the first group built. The results converge, get verified, and you come back to a finished, tested pull request. The coordination happens outside your conversation, so the plan stays on track no matter how big the task gets, and progress is saved as the run goes. So if something interrupts the workflow, it picks up where it left off instead of starting over. Let me walk you through how to actually use this, because the activation is simple, but the implications are not. There are 2 ways to trigger dynamic workflows. The first is to simply include the word workflow in your prompt. Something like, create a workflow to audit every script in my project for performance issues. Claude reads your request, builds a plan, shows you what it's about to run, and asks for confirmation before it starts burning tokens. The second way is to enable a setting called ultracode when it's in the effort menu in Claude Code. When ultracode is on, Claude automatically decides when a task is big enough to warrant a workflow. You don't even have to think about whether to use it. You just give it a big task and it figures out the right approach. A few practical notes you need to know. Dynamic workflows is available in Claude Code for Max, Team, and Enterprise plans. It's on by default for Max and Team. Enterprise admins can enable it through managed settings. It is token intensive. The first time a workflow triggers, Claude shows you the plan and asks for confirmation so you know what you're about to spend. Start with a scope task to get a feel for the token cost before you throw your entire code base at it. CatWoo, a product manager at Anthropic, used it internally to catalog hundreds of A/B test flags and find the stale ones. What would have taken sequential investigation of each flag finished in under 10 minutes with parallel agents. And here's something I really like. Workflows are reusable. You can save one as a / command in your project and share it with your team, or save it in your home directory and use it across every project you work on. That means the workflow you build today to audit performance across your code base becomes a one-command tool you run whenever you want. The one that scans for security issues, same thing. Build it once, run it forever. Boris Cherny, one of the lead engineers on Claude, called dynamic workflows the future of how teams handle large migrations and refactors, the most important work that's easiest to push off to a better time because it would tie up engineers for a quarter. If you're a Cursor user, Opus 4.8 is already available there too. Cursor CEO Michael Trell said that on their benchmarks, Opus 4.8 exceeds prior Opus models across every effort level with tool calling that's meaningfully more efficient. So you're not locked into Claude Code to get the benefit. If Cursor is your daily driver, you get the model upgrade today and you can bet the workflow style features will follow. Now let's talk about what's real and what's marketing, because there's a catch worth knowing about. Some independent benchmarking from Andon Labs shows Opus 4.8 actually scoring worse than Opus 4.7 on certain adversarial benchmarks. Vending Bench, which tests whether models will cheat to win, and Blueprint Bench, the honesty push, the model being less willing to bluff, deceive, or cut corners, came at a measurable cost to raw performance on benchmarks that reward winning at all costs. I think that's the right trade. A model that's honest about its limits is far more useful in a production workflow than one that fakes its way through a benchmark, but you should know the trade exists. If you need a model that will aggressively optimize without second-guessing itself, Opus 4.7 might still be the better pick for certain tasks. The alignment gains in 4.8 are real. Anthropic says its misaligned behavior rates are now similar to Mythos Preview, their best aligned model, but alignment isn't free. Also, Anthropic raised $65 billion yesterday in their Series H round, valuing the company at $965 billion. That's the biggest AI funding round in history. They now have a higher valuation than OpenAI. The round was led by Altimeter, Dragoneer, Green Oaks, and Sequoia. Strategic investors include Micron, Samsung, and SK Hynix, the companies that make the memory and storage chips that power these models. Anthropic also signed agreements for up to 10 gigawatts of new compute capacity across Amazon, Google, and SpaceX. 10 gigawatts. That's more power than some small countries consume. And they're hinting that Mythos class models, the ones currently restricted to a small number of organizations under Project Glasswing for cybersecurity work, will be available to all customers in the coming weeks. Opus 4.8 is the appetizer. The main course is close, so here's the bottom line for indie game developers. Dynamic workflows is the tool you use for the jobs you've been putting off, the code-base-wide refactors, the framework migrations, the test generation passes that cover your entire project, the security audits that would take a human a week and an AI agent a day of sequential work. Things that used to take a quarter now take a weekend, and things that took a weekend now take an afternoon. Opus 4.8's honesty push means fewer of those infuriating moments where the model swears something works and it absolutely does not. The effort control means you can be cheap on simple tasks and go all in on the ones that matter. And the fast mode pricing means running hundreds of agents in parallel doesn't bankrupt you. If you're not using workflows yet, you're leaving most of what Opus 4.8 offers on the table. The model upgrade is incremental, the workflow capability is transformational. And when Mythos drops in the coming weeks, you'll want to already be fluent in how to run an agent swarm. Inside AI Craft, we're already using Opus 4.8 and dynamic workflows to refactor and ship game projects faster. We test these workflows on real code bases every week. Join the community and see what agent swarm coding looks like in practice. Please feel free to subscribe and check out the links in the description below.